Okay, lovelies, we are back again. Biology of Kundalini, Exploring the Fire of Life by Jana Dixon. Today we are, if you are in the book, on page 28, Conscious Incarnation. And we're just going to dig in because we've got quite a lot of meat here. Our challenge is to recognize and develop the biological potential within. This is the true goal of life, says Joseph Chilton Pearce. So recognize and develop the biological potential, okay? So conscious incarnation, she starts out by saying Kundalini is the miracle of life itself, quickened and amplified. Metamorphosis must be made increasingly conscious in order to reach and stabilize higher homeostasis and meta adaptation with spirit. Awakening or spiritual acceleration demands conscious incarnation. We are conscious of each process. We are aware of it. For if the awakening of consciousness does not become increasingly conscious, several negative outcomes may occur. She lists, if there's psychological or emotional resistance, the body will not be able to handle the charge, which leads to the breakdown of metabolism. Okay, body can't handle it with psychological or emotional resistance. Number two, the influx of energy meeting resistance could generate more primitive chemistry and even madness. Okay, so you have all this energy, life force, and there's resistance that could actually tweak the chemistry. Number three, there may be a reduction in consciousness due to numbing and addictions as the lower nature tries to control what's happening. Okay, we see that. Four, if we don't have a desire for lucidity, we could use the ecstasy for zoning out rather than breaking through to even greater lucidity. Zoning out is a big one that a lot of people in their spiritual practice do. Number five, the down cycles will be more extreme and the recovery prolonged. That is if you're not conscious of the whole process. Six, if we bite down against our own incarnation, we could become spiritually anxious, essentially losing trust in the benevolence of the universe. So that's a tricky one because you're constantly fighting a mental state that you have to keep rewiring and rewiring consciously. So whenever you come up against a block, saying, if we bite down against our incarnation, then we're going to lose trust, because the trust, it's pushing us further and further. We respond to Kundalini in the same way we respond to life in general, depending on the set of our nervous system and our sincere desire for growth and maturity. So the formula for Kundalini is flow of X energy divided by resistance. That is conductance, amps, times energy resources, or watts, divided by toxicity or inferior wiring, okay? So the result of our awakening will be determined largely by our attitude, our intention, and our ability to allow. Those three things: attitude, intention, willingness to allow, which can be hard. That's when we use body practices to notice where we're clenching. And if we're like completely clenching at the thought of something, we're having massive resistance, and we need to open the flow to allowing. We fully manifest on planet Earth to the degree of our acceptance or rejection of our own incarnate being. This allowing of the self with a bigger S will dictate the flavor of both our life and our Kundalini trip. To avoid resistance and maladaptation, the path of fire requires a certain strength. The key to metamorphic mastery is to become superbly adapted to one's own incarnation. One's own incarnation, not anyone else's. Become superbly adapted to your own incarnation. Conscious incarnation is giving ourselves permission to show up. Hence, awakening is a choice. Metamorphosis is a process of purification, and yet it is not simple detoxification that's going on. but ongoing refinement of life itself toward the incarnation of the deeper self. So the purification is patterning old self, old ways, old conditions, and it's like a continuous process, right? It's not a simple detox. Evolution just is, when we stop suppressing, abusing, and holding ourselves back from the fluid realization of our being. The inertia and resistance of past structures causes tension between what we are now and that which is trying to manifest from beyond the veil, okay? There's a tension that's created if we're resisting. Due to this disparity, the pressures of birthing consciousness can be enormous. And there's a tendency for the poor ego to be drawn all over the map while the deeper self is coming to light. So the ego is trying to figure out what the issue is, right? It's going all over the place. We need enormous faith, understanding, and compassion in order to ride the waves. It takes genius to ride the wave of emergence into the depths of the unknown in order to avoid being smashed under the tension wave or vainly try to save ourselves by crawling back on the beach. Oh, what a great metaphor. Isn't that what we find ourselves sometimes wanting to do when we're in the heat of the initiation transformation? We just want to crawl back on the shore, like, oh, where I was is okay. Let me just crawl back there, instead of like continuing to go through the metamorphosis. In order to move past a structure of consciousness to a new structure of consciousness, the present one must be perturbed or penetrated with greater energy of awareness. The peak experiences of Kundalini are such a perturbation of our former conditioning, very perturbing. Whether we receive this perturbation through vibration, music, drumming, dancing, chanting, or drugs, or stress, or romance, or guru devotion, or meditation, it's all a doorway to our own deepest source and condition of love, the bigger self. The peak experiences of Kundalini allow participation in the world brain, or the earth soul, through the disidentification with the ignoble conditioned stage. So the stage that's not noble, the conditioned part of us, this awakening disassociates us with that and gives us access to the world mind, the greater soul of humanity. The process of awakening is the hardest thing in the world to do for the simple reason that we must confront ourselves. Rather than attempting to formulate reasons for our behavior and engagements of life, we have to come to clearly see we are not and have not been awake. So that's the most difficult part. Incarnation is the hardest task imposed upon us, for the instinct is to back away from the edge as the energy of consciousness touches our contraction. To the degree that we retreat, though, our entire physiology and consciousness is diminished and grows suspended. The immune system, the nervous system, and the mitochondria exist in the matrix of our positive or negative assessment of our world and ourselves. Our own defensive resistance to negative experiences and trauma tightens the rubber band of the armoring, making the symptoms of our contraction more obvious. You might say, rigid belief in the memory of your past self is the only thing holding you back from enlightenment. Rigid belief in the memory of your past self, the only thing holding you back. Or of other people, the rigid belief in their past self. When we give ourselves permission to move beyond who we have known ourselves to be, at least then we are growing. Repression does not make things go away, but condemns these things to shadow realms where they incubate and infect the entirety of our lives with disharmony. Numbness and unconsciousness produce ever-increasing dysfunction, neuroses, and the removal from reality, okay? Numbing out and like not wanting to look at it doesn't make stuff go away, nor does resisting. So thus, when our conditioning is penetrated The symptoms are likely to be more extreme than, say, if we came from a very benign, loving history. The way we've each built our armor is our own particular resolution. That means our Kundalini awakening will arise in the direction of that specific armor that we've constructed, or that archetype. The Kundalini goes there, and it wants to dissolve that structure. That is why life itself is archetypal. Through archetypal sympathetic resonance, we are inevitably drawn to a specific great attractor that will break through our veil and touch our deepest level of existence. That's the humanizing process, the great alchemy of awakening. Intimacy and consciousness, she says, are essentially the same thing. If you turn your feeling, sense, emotion, and thoughts toward coming forth to the nth degree without hesitation or doubt, then you automatically increase in strength and number of mitochondria and immune cells. So let me say that again. If you turn your feelings, sense, emotions, and thoughts toward coming forth to the, she says, nth degree, without hesitation, you just lean into it. You automatically then increase the strength of your immune system, and your mitochondria and immune cells all increase. So she's proposing a conscious, intentional incarnation as a form of mindfulness meditation in coordination with breath. Imagine an embodiment practice on purposeful incarnation, being here on purpose. Not just as a visualization or affirmation, but as an allowing, a letting the universe penetrate one's being to the max, opening to that. When you do this, and you can do this with me right now, you can actually feel your cells respond, because that's what they want to do. That's what they're made for. So when we turn the direction of incarnation and we ask to be penetrated by Source, it says with conscious incarnation, we initiate ourselves through our individual cells. Since Kundalini is the universe becoming more conscious of itself, when the miracle of metamorphosis happens to us, we should learn to go with it. Not just for our own salvation, but for the entire tree of life. Every time we resort to our addictions to back down from our raw edge and full self-responsibility, the more we interfere and resist the spiritual plan for humanity. In metamorphosis, the body-soul does most of the work, including transmutation of the elements. All we can really do is get out of the way, and just doing that takes a lot of courage, all of our intelligence and intuition, and all of our respect and love to just let this thing happen through us and not try to stop it or thwart it or repress it or back down from it or run away. She's saying that's the courage we need. Evolution just is. It's half the battle is already won if we stop getting in our own way. That's always what we're fighting against. To the extent we choose energy, increasing choices in any situation is the extent to which we create our soul. So choose energy, increasing choices. In reference to Jung now, this means embracing the tension of opposites, the marriage of matter and spirit, form and emptiness, or form and formlessness, embracing that marriage, the heart of the tantric tradition, which is both polarities are important. Compassionately embracing shadow and light, the up and down of the Tao, to take the brakes off, to stop hiding under our shell of conformity, to stop pretending we are limited and deficient. Self-abandonment is the primary trauma that we must learn to face into to avoid abdicating from our own life. All we really want and need is ourself. That is what we are longing for. Total responsibility for one's condition. Total responsibility for one's condition needs to really be groped in order to move into this kind of sovereignty where self self-development is even possible. Little self with big self. Otherwise, everything else in the world, according to our triggers, determines who we are. Love, of course, is the opposite of self-abandonment. Self-responsibility is becoming responsive to self with a big S. None other than freedom, enlightenment, sovereignty, and individuation. That's what self-responsibility is. Spiritual realization has a concurrent physical component. This too must be fully understood and allowed in order for spiritual substantiation. This is why the body must be allowed to transmute for incarnation to become real. This isn't just a spiritual thing or a nice thought. This is about taking the body with us. Our culture tends to prevent physical spiritualization of the body, and thus emotions and mind and spirit, they don't grow to the extent they can, okay? By understanding the changes to the nervous system, this is why I love this book, is it's going into the physical. By understanding the changes that are going to happen to your nervous system or that are happening, to your metabolism, to your hormones, to all facets of your biophysics and biochemistry of Kundalini, then we can work with the changes to increase our adaptive and homeostatic abilities. So we're working with our physical body to adapt with us as we increase our awareness. We have to, or we'll shed the body again. And that's just a reincarnation ticket. So it's fine if that's the way you want to go, but this is saying evolution in the body, mind, because we're at the 0 point, because we're at 100% novelty, like we spoke about a few videos ago. Change is happening now. It's changeless change. It's exponential growth, and it's a moment where we get to evolve all at once if we choose with the body, like a physical enlightenment process, a transmutation, a quickening. That's what the Kundalini awakening is. By being, in this way, as our life force and incarnation rises, we can prepare to meet it, thus sustaining the evolutionary wave. Without conscious meta-adaptation, we tend to grow in fiery spurts that generate years of recovery, like a huge, big explosion and then recovery time. I did that for a while. By being unskilled at metamorphosis, we spend so much of our energy and effort into coping with physical, emotional, and mental effects that there's little of us left to bring out our true creative gifts and spiritual genius. We're just coping with the body. We're just doing healing work. Having foreknowledge or insight into this natural metabolic process can save years of fear, regression, secondary fallout, and inertial backstepping. So just knowledge of this. As with life in general, we can choose to be maladapted or pro-adapted to Kundalini. It takes more heart, intelligence, and discipline to be pro-adapted, because often the first impulse is to seek comfort, right, when this is happening. And often the comfort we choose is to numb out through various life negative means. Now, we have free choice to do that. Even the evolutionary energy of Kundalini itself, she says, can dumb us down and zonk us out if we're not aware. Or we can use this metamorphic energy to awaken us progressively into the mysteries and deepen our experience of life. It's our choice. By searching within and learning how to be pro-adapted under the circumstances that have no precedent. I get it. You've never seen people do this before, so it sometimes feels like it's hard to be adaptive when you don't have examples. But if we will do that, if we will learn how to adapt ourselves, we will be the pioneers. We are the pioneers paving the way for the rest of humanity to follow us. Integrating the huge energies of Kundalini is very difficult at times. I can also attest. We have to both relax into allowing the dissolution of our former self while building up and supporting new neurological growth for deeper and higher skill levels. This is happening simultaneously. We have to not fear the temporary loss of our left brain adaptive functions, while at the same time exercising those functions in order to preserve the neurons for higher brain capacities. So you see how complicated this sort of is? Like, we're unhooking some of our synapses, but we're also using them to get us to the new level. So we're unhooking from the old while we're using them to hook to the new. So we're kind of like losing our structure mind for a minute while we're holding the vision. It can be tricky. We must progressively both let go and build. And the reason why we must do this is so the gains we make during our period of spiritual accelerations will not be lost, but will be preserved through our experience of the art and science of being. Integrating the energy, therefore, becomes our warriorship. It is our growing edge. As each of us does this, it becomes easier and easier for all of humanity to hold and convey the full power of spirit and to loosen the hold of the Borg, she says. The Borg is anti-individualism, a menial default, automatic programming of consensus conformity, essentially created through splitting and compartmentalizing the mind, creating a schism between body, mind, and soul. So the world's been largely made up of the Borg. That's why you see it in movies, Star Trek. I mean, they just reveal in those movies true things all the time if we could just see and apply them. This thanatos means loss of differentiation and integrity of the individuals, allowing them to form a Borg, or a tumorous mass of anti-life predatorism. Yeah, so when we're not leaning into Kundalini, we're actually leaning into becoming a massive cancer of society. That's the truth, because Kundalini is not a snake coiled up and waiting, she says. The awakening of Kundalini is a synergy and a synthesis of body, mind, and soul, which our dense culture tries strenuously to avoid. Waking up to the sleep and pain of deadness is hard work. And then maintaining the momentum and the trajectory so one does not fall back into the plenum of consensus trance is also even harder. If you look at the absolute great minds in history, few of them were able to save themselves from the fury of the ignorant crowd. Modern man has broken down the habitat of the natural man, hooking humanity onto an IV of sugar water, and now the sugar water is seen for what it is. Now that our moral line is presenting itself to us more clearly through sheer necessity, we can change over to a more profound and sustainable culture. I mean, more and more of us are seeing the truth. Those that try to cling to the past will suffer, as will those who are simply without muse vocation in the transformation to the new culture. Like, nothing is inspiring you. The ensouled way of human existence is forced on us from all sides because the sporific distraction of the sugar water is no longer valid. The old system must be done away with if humanity is to be permitted to grow towards a noble condition. If we are sick, we should start defining our sickness, give a prognosis, and work out the cure. It begins, of course, with the rape and abuse of the earth herself. This might be where to look for the prognosis. Then we lose the strength and humanizing that the earth provided, but in particular, there is the dumbing down of the population with fluoride, aspartame, and all the zillions of other chemicals, including hormonal agricultural chemicals. She says, no way spirit can survive the onslaught of generations of so much abuse. So we must get over our myopia of simply dealing with symptoms and get to the root cause of things. We need originology to become foundations of all sectors of human thought. We need to get to the root, not the symptoms, as the first and primary impulse of the process of consciousness. This changes from the degenerative to the regenerative state, brought about by the individual, ultimately resulting in a regenerative or truly humane civilization that does not spread forth upon the face of the earth trillions and tons of toxins and agricultural biocides, But once the collective gets it together, the individual will have a chance of surviving in noble form to reinstate the humanizing principle of man. In order to integrate the different branches of human investigation, she is presenting, this is the end of the first part of the book, she's proposed an overarching field of study she calls the logos of original cause. If philosophy be the highest of human sciences, then the highest of the philosophies is the logos of original cause. This is, I think, the most important branch of philosophy, which I tend to agree, which embraces all philosophies, arts, religions, and sciences. It is the pure trans-anthropomorphic witnessing at the causal level to reveal the cause of things through the complex matrix of symptoms and facts. What is the cause? What is the root? What is the origin, the core? Since we have barely risen out of problem consciousness, we still have a civilization built through attention to the symptoms of things. We haven't yet developed the types of solution consciousness that naturally and instantly attempts to penetrate and deal with causes. With the logos of original cause, we begin a new branch of philosophy to facilitate causal thinking on all levels of society and in all realms. In this way, our ecology, industry, commerce, justice, medicine, education, politics, and military all become governed by the highest spiritual and moral imperatives. Wow, don't we need all of that now? With the science of assisted evolution, we can start a new era of civilization and begin to live as a global mystic society, illuminated and synchronized from within. We need no longer pull on the reins of inertia to hold ourselves back. We need no longer cower in fear of the atomic force we embody. We can let that force run free, and we can grow to meet our soul's needs. We can connect and know ourselves as the beloved, allowing the full force of the bliss of the return itself to wake us up. To do this, we need Kundalini coping skills and a faith born of the realization that what this world really needs is a revolution of authentic spirituality, an ecstatic wave of evolution that spreads across the globe. That comes to the end of part 1. She ends it with, no matter how exultant our genius may soar into our utopian future, or how sophisticated we appear, it is all just idle braggadocio of our sympathetic nervous system affords us no security, if our sympathetic nervous system affords us no security. So we must build it into the body. That is the preface, part 1, of getting into why this material is so important, and we will begin to breach that tomorrow with symptomology and delving into what the symptoms look like and why they look that way, what's going on in the biology during a Kundalini awakening. And I'm so excited to get into that part with you. Thank you so much for joining me for this reading and discussion, and I hope to see you back again. Tomorrow will be part 8. Thank you for joining.